Hi, my name is Jacob. Today, I'm going to walk you through how to use SightLab VR Pro. SightLab is your no-code solution to building powerful, customizable VR experiments in just minutes. Whether you're studying behavior, attention, decision-making, or perception, SightLab lets you design your VR experiments with a visual interface with no programming required. In the next 15 minutes, we're going to design a simple VR experiment start to finish. This tutorial will cover every step of the way, from downloading SightLab to understanding the UI, to grabbing 3D models and adding in your own objects, to collecting the data to test your hypotheses. And then, when the tutorial is over, I'll share some resources to answer any questions you may still have left. Sound good? Then let's get started. Once you download SightLab, you'll have access to everything you need in this folder in the directory you chose. Let's take a look at what's inside. We have access to example scripts, projects, the asset browser, documentation, the inspector, the GPT Assistant, and so much more. Everything you need to develop your experiment you can find access to here. Think of it as the home page. Let's open up the project folder where we'll begin to develop our experiment. The first thing you want to do is make a copy of the blank project. Let's rename it. I'll call it Test 1, or you can make it your project name. So open it up and click on SightLab VR. Here, it opens up a white room, our default blank environment. We have two panels, our project configuration panel and our trial configuration panel. Let's look at the trial configuration panel first. Each experiment can have multiple trials, with each trial having the option for a different environment, whether that's 3D models or 360 media. That leaves a lot of possibilities for environments to work with. Thankfully, we have a set of environments you can work with in our sample projects folder. Let's open it up, go to Resources, Environments, and drag in an environment. This will automatically save the environment into our Test 1 resources. Or, as I mentioned earlier, we have an asset browser, environments, objects, avatars, and so much more at your disposal. If that's not enough, there are content libraries like Sketchfab that have over 150,000 available models for you to choose from. Let's drag in a different environment from our sample project resources. We'll use the modern office skyline as the basis for our experiment. In this step, we're going to learn how to populate our environment with objects our participants can look at, grab, and interact with. And then we'll learn how to make these objects smart by tagging them to collect the data we actually care about. Let's make our environment more interesting. Next to the environment, press Edit, which opens up the inspector. This is where all the magic happens. To navigate around the inspector, you can use the left mouse drag to rotate around the scene. Right mouse drag allows you to move left, right, up, or down. And scrolling your mouse wheel allows you to zoom in and out. Let's begin editing our experiment by indicating our start point. From our resources, navigate to Scene Objects and SightLab Start Point. Let's drag this into the inspector and press Add File and place it where you want participants to begin. This step is very important. It's not just about positioning, it's about controlling that crucial first impression. Where they start looking matters for your data. To change the positioning of any object, we can use these three tools. Translate allows us to move an object to a new position. Rotate allows us to move an object around an axis. And Scale allows us to change the size of an object. I'll adjust this to how I want participants to begin. Let's rotate it to the right a little bit. There we have it. Now, to keep our experiment simple, let's work with our environment to create a simple hypothesis. Our research question is, how does the framing of a question influence what participants look at and how quickly they identify an environmental fault? We'll test this by giving different groups of participants different instructions. So, let's take a look around this environment. Notice we have a plant positioned at each corner of the room. This plant, however, is bare, which will be our environmental fault. SightLab already collects data on the default environment, meaning it will provide data like scan paths and heat maps of everywhere you're looking at. Adding objects into the environment automatically makes them regions of interest, meaning additional data like view counts and dwell time are also tracked. But what about our plants, which are already included in the environment? We're going to create regions of interest around each plant. These zones will track exactly when and how long participants look at each corner area. To add a region of interest, we go back to Resources. From there, go to Scene Objects, Regions of Interest, and drag that back in. Using our Translate tool, we'll click on the region of interest and drag that over to our plant. We can use the scale feature to increase the size and use the translate to format it to how we like. Now let's look at the scene graph panel. Click on ROI and rename it to fault. We'll repeat the process of adding in regions of interest on each of the plants. Take a moment and do this yourself. You can name the regions Plant 1, Plant 2, and Plant 3. Now that we have that done, we can save the environment and then exit out and go back to SightLab. Here, we'll refresh the environment, and then you can see we have our regions of interest showing around the room. And you might be wondering, are these green boxes visible in the experiment? And by default, they are. That's why there's the target, visible, and grabbable boxes which you can check off. Now what do these mean? When you mark an object as a target, it makes it so it can be tracked for interactions or gaze events. For example, if you want SightLab to collect data, like dwell time or fixations on an object, you'd set it as a target. For visibility, it determines whether the object can be rendered in the scene. So we want to uncheck these for all our regions of interest. And grabbable allows the user to pick up and move the object in VR, usually with controllers or tracked hands. To continue along with creating our experiment, we have to add instructions. There's two approaches we can take to do this. I'll show you the easier way first, but this one requires one line of code. Let's begin by editing our SightLab file. This will open up Wizard, our Python editor. The one line of code is yield SightLab.showInstructions, and then any instructions you want to display. Go to File, Save, and then exit out. Now, let's see how that looks like. Press Continue, Desktop mode for now, and press OK. We'll press Submit, and as you can see, it shows our instructions before our trial begins. The second way we can approach it is by using a proxy trial and adding in our instructions as an object. So, let's go to our sample project, go to Resources, and drag in our blank white room. Again, we'll want to go back to Inspector, so press Edit. I already made an object with instructions, but that's something you'll have to make on your own, as a slide or graphic. I'll drag that in now, and there we have it. Let's add our SightLab start point again. We'll drag that back in, and then use the Translate tool to move it back a bit. We'll then save the file, and then refresh it in SightLab. To incorporate it as a proxy trial, we'll increase trial count to 2. Our second trial will be the office, and by enabling tracking, our data will be collected. Let's then check all our regions of interest again, and we'll set our stop condition where staring at the fault for 5 seconds will end the experiment. Now, let's double check our trials are correct. We have our instructions ready, we have our experiment ready, so let's hit continue. Select the headset I'm using, which is the MetaQuest Pro, and begin. Adding the instructions this way is a bit cooler. You can put any graphic and image you want and then drop it in your environment. It makes it a cooler experience for the user, just a bit more work. Once the user takes their time reading, they can move on to the next trial. This one is tracked. As you can see, the environment interacts with your head and eye movements as most VR applications would. If you can focus in on the green dot, it shows exactly where I'm looking at with eye tracking. This requires eye tracking hardware, which the MetaQuest Pro has. You can move around, wander around the environment, and all this is being tracked by SightLab. As I mentioned earlier, everywhere I look can be rendered into a heat map and scan path. Every millisecond of this experiment is being collected. Our recording shows what objects we're looking at, but with the headset on, you don't see this information. We also don't see the green boxes that identify regions of interest. We turn off visibility, So as soon as we stare at our fault for 5 seconds, our experiment will end. Now that we've completed the trial, let's look at some of the data. You can find this in the data folder. Go to our trial data and click on Summary. First up, we have the participant ID, which is important in an actual experiment, where you need to gather lots of participants and trials to draw a significant conclusion. We also have the trial number to know which one we're referring to. It's also important to note the gaze metrics. Using these metrics shows the intersection point in 3D space. We have access to dwell time data too. Every time we spent looking at a region of interest, it logged it in this file. We also have access to fixation data, where the eye pauses long enough on one spot that the brain can process what it's looking at. One folder up, we have the experiment summary that covers the broader experiment. Once again, we have the participant ID. We also have the total number of trials completed, conditions used, duration of each trial, and some summary statistics of the trial. Sometimes, you'll want to add your own custom data into the experiment summary file, for example, ratings or survey answers. We can do that by adding in a bit of code. Adding this chunk of code allows us to add a new column in our summary file, expanding what's possible with SightLab. All of this is represented in our replay file. We'll go back to our test 1 folder, click on SightLab replay, and then load our recent trial run. Here, we can see a heat map of all the popular spots we looked at in the trial, and also a direct replay of where we looked at. It shows us this from a third-party perspective, tracking our eyes and head movement as the trial runs. Let's take a look at some additional features to enhance your future experiments. In our project configuration panel, we can enable screen recording, and SightLab will capture a video of everything the participant sees. This is incredibly valuable for presentations, training new researchers, and those instances when watching a trial tells more than the data. SightLab also supports the Biopac Integration. This is where your VR research meets psychophysiology. SightLab can send event triggers to external hardware, letting you synchronize VR behavior with EEG, GSR, heart rate, or any other physiological measures. You can correlate stress responses with gaze patterns or neural activity with spatial attention. And as I mentioned earlier, SightLab also supports 360 media. So instead of a 3D environment, you can run trials inside 360 videos or panoramic images. This is important when you want participants to look around real-world content instead of virtual 3D. Some more features within SightLab include multi-user, where this mode allows 2 or more participants to share the same virtual environment in real time. This is crucial when you want to study social interactions, collaborative tasks, or group training in VR. If you don't want to build your own experiment from scratch, we also have the example scripts library. Each script is ready to run, but more importantly, they can act as building blocks and you can tailor them towards your own experiment. When you need help, you've got options. The SightLab GPT Assistant can answer specific questions about experimental design and data analysis. And the documentation in our website and in your SightLab folder covers information about advanced features and troubleshooting. Congrats! You've just built an entire VR experiment from scratch, with no programming required. But this is just the start of what's possible with SightLab. Thanks for tagging along with me today. I hope you learn more about SightLab and VR experiments. If you or your team hasn't used SightLab, please click on the links in the description to purchase or demo SightLab. Thanks.